Mayday, superior status, boost valve, good right down, break! Wait now, hold on.
Somewhere between here and the horizon, the sky swallowed a plain whole dot, no fire, no wreckage, no farewell. Just a voice on a radio, crackling, confident, then gone. And in the silence that followed, one of the greatest mysteries in human history was born. The year was 1937. The world was smaller then, mapped and measured, and proud of itself. Explorers had conquered mountains, crossed oceans, planted flags on every frozen edge of the earth. And yet, one woman looked at all of that and said, not enough. She wanted to wrap her arms around the entire planet from the air. Her name was Amelia Earhart. And on July 2nd of that year, she and her navigator Fred Noonan climbed into their twin-engine Lockheed Electra, lifted off from Lae, New Guinea, and pointed themselves toward a speck of coral in the middle of the Pacific, a tiny island called Howland, just 1.5 miles long, a needle in the largest haystack on Earth. They never arrived to understand what happened. You first have to understand what they were flying into. The route from Lae to Howland Island was approximately 2,556 miles of open ocean. 18 hours with no landmarks, no visual cues, almost no margin for error. Howland Island had no runway lights, no radar, no tower. Just a Coast Guard cutter named the Itasca, sitting offshore. Broadcasting into the void. Navigation in 1937 was not what it is today. No GPS, no satellite. Noonan was using a sextant, a handheld instrument measuring angles between stars and the horizon. He was one of the best navigators alive. And still, against the Pacific, that almost wasn't enough. Headwinds were stronger than forecast. The flight was taking longer than planned. And as the hours accumulated, so did the uncertainty. By the time they should have been approaching Howland, they were already searching for it. The final radio transmissions tell a story all on their own, and they tell it in fragments. Beginning around 7:42 in the morning, the Itasca began receiving signals. Earhart's voice came in confident at first, reporting clouds, overcast skies, a position that didn't quite match what the ship expected. The crew transmitted back, repeatedly, with direction-finding signals that could have guided her in. The evidence suggests she never received them clearly. Then, at 8:43 a.m., came the transmission that still echoes across history. Her voice, urgent now, reporting they were flying a line of position, could not see the island, and that fuel was running critically low. After that, silence. The Itasca set up smoke. It blasted its whistle into open air. It called and called into a radio that had stopped answering. Nothing came back. The search that followed was immediate and enormous, the largest rescue operation in American naval history at the time. Ships and aircraft swept more than 250,000 square miles of open ocean for 16 days. They found nothing. Not a fuel slick. Not a debris field. Not a single confirmed piece of the Electra. After 16 days, the official search was called off. But the questions, those never stopped. 3 theories have emerged over the decades. Each has its evidence. Each tells a different story about what those final hours looked like. The first is the simplest. They ran out of fuel. They went down in the ocean. The Pacific is deep, in places, deeper than Everest is tall. A plane that sinks in those depths may never be found, no matter how hard anyone looks. Modern sonar expeditions have searched along their projected flight path and found nothing conclusive. But absence of evidence, as they say, is not evidence of absence. If this is what happened, it was swift, final, a death worthy of the life. A pioneer who pushed too far and paid the price the sky sometimes demands. But not everyone believes the story. Ended in the water. The second theory is supported by a growing body of physical evidence. And it begins on a small uninhabited island called Nikumaroro, roughly 350 miles southeast of Howland. If Earhart and Noonan, unable to find Howland, had turned south along their navigational line of position, they could have reached it. The math works. The timing works. In 1940, British colonial officers discovered a partial human skeleton on the island's southwestern shore, along with part of a shoe and what may have been a sextant box. The bones were analyzed at the time and labeled male. Case closed, or so it seemed. Decades later, forensic anthropologists reanalyzed the original measurements using modern methods. Their conclusion was striking. The skeletal proportions were more consistent with a woman of Northern European descent, of Amelia Earhart's approximate height and build. The bones themselves were lost, but the questions remained. Researchers have since found fragments of aluminum on the island, consistent with the Electra's skin, evidence of fire, evidence of camp making. Someone lived on that island, used tools, tried to survive. If Earhart and Noonan landed on Nikumaroro, and they could have, the reef flat is long enough, then their story did not end in the ocean. It continued for days or weeks on a coral atoll far from the world that had celebrated them. And it ended quietly. On a shore, no one was watching. The third theory lives in the darkest corner of this story, and it refuses to die. The year was 1937. Japan was expanding aggressively across the Pacific. Tensions between Tokyo and Washington were building, and the route Earhart was flying took her directly over some of the most strategically sensitive waters on Earth. Some researchers have pointed to military-grade RADIO equipment aboard the Electra, beyond what a civilian flight would typically carry. Others have noted the unusual level of U.S. Navy involvement in what was nominally a private journey. The theory is that the flight had a secondary purpose, gathering intelligence over Japanese-controlled island territories. That when the Electra came down, it did so near Japanese-controlled waters. And that what followed was a geopolitical incident both governments had reason to bury. Eyewitness accounts collected from Marshall Island residents describe a plane going down in the area. 2 survivors brought ashore. Veterans who served in the Pacific after World War II have spoken of photographs shown to them, of stories told in quiet rooms. But documents, if they ever existed, have never surfaced. Historians treat this theory with skepticism. The evidence is fragmented, the chain of proof broken. But the questions linger, because the Pacific held secrets in those years, and some of them have never fully come up. Here is what we know for certain. Earhart and Noonan took off on July 2, 1937. They made radio contact with the Itasca in their final hours. The last confirmed transmission came at 8:43 a.m. The search that followed was the largest of its era. No definitive wreckage has ever been found. Everything else lives in the space between those facts and the silence that came after. What makes this disappearance different from other aviation mysteries is not just the scale of the search. It is the scale of the person. Earhart was not simply a pilot. She was a symbol of what was possible, of what courage looked like when it refused to stay on the ground. She carried with her, on that final flight, the imagination of an entire generation. And when she vanished, she took the ending of her own story with her. The ocean keeps its secrets well. Somewhere in the deep water, or on a distant reef, or in a file no one has opened yet, the answer may still exist. Every year brings new technology, new forensic tools, new ways of looking at old evidence. And every year, the mystery holds. Amelia Earhart lifted off on a July morning and never came home. The sky, as it sometimes does, gave nothing back. Not a trace. Not a word. Not a goodbye. Just the static. Just the silence. Just the question that outlived them both. Where did they go? Welcome to Mayday Memory. where the sky gives nothing back easily. If the great unsolved stories of aviation are the ones that keep pulling you back, subscribe. We are just getting started.